All right, Lindsey. So thanks for coming on the podcast. I know we spoke a little while ago, but I was excited to have you on and talk about what you do. But we'll talk a little bit about where you're from, because I know you're from Wayne. I grew up in the area too, and you'll tell me about your background. But then I also want to get into, all the stuff that you do, because I think one of the problems for business owners is coming up with content. Like they just struggle, especially whether it's online or for menus or for an ad or, of writing an ebook. I mean, it's a struggle for a lot of people. So we'll talk about that, but maybe you can get into growing up in Wayne and how you got into, writing. And I guess you're probably a journalism major or something like that, right? Like an English major. So tell me about your background.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's really exciting to be here.
Thanks.
I grew up in Wayne, as you mentioned. My dad is actually an educational published author. So he, growing up, I grew up in the home with him where he was an adjunct professor and he was teaching his book. So I grew up, in an environment where I was always, in the publishing world. So when I went to college, I decided I wanted to major in journalism and communications and then go off into working in the publishing industry. So that's kind of how I ended up in publishing. I first worked in editorial in an educational publisher for a number of years, which was a really great experience.
Was that like textbooks or was it?
Yeah, so it was actually textbooks and then textbook supplements, so like PowerPoints and different things that go along with the books.
Okay. Probably less books around nowadays. They're getting digital, right? They're all online and stuff.
Yeah, and when I worked there, everything was more primarily print, but they were starting to transition to ebooks.
Slowly.
More. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
But then, after a number of years, I ended up moving into trade publishing, which are, your traditional books that you find at Barnes & Noble and on Amazon.
Right.
I did that for a number of years, and I moved into a marketing role, which was really fun and exciting. And I worked on nonfiction, health, and lifestyles books.
Okay. So when you were doing trade publications, what industries were you working on?
So a wide range of things, everything from diet and fitness to cooking, professional organizing. There were some business titles, parenting, wide range of titles.
So were you writing things for them? Were you editing it? How was it working?
So actually at that point I was doing marketing. So there was actually different people at the publishing company that would do the editorial work.
Got it.
Yeah, but once the book was ready to go out and get, all the...
You were marketing it to get people to read it and buy it and so forth.
Exactly, yeah. So I was doing more...
An important skill, by the way.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I was getting the marketing plans together and implementing it and helping the author, do his own marketing or his or her own marketing on their own too. And that was really fun because, I started off in editorial and now I got to see marketing. So I got to see, both sides of the...
Yeah, if you write a book, nobody reads it, it's kind of a waste.
Yeah, and I definitely think that's something that, especially with a lot more people self-publishing these days.
Right.
A lot of people are so focused on getting the book out, but then, once the book is out there, you need to help other people learn about it. So marketing is a really key thing that's kind of overlooked a lot.
Definitely. Okay, so then I interrupted you. So after that, you went on to, what did you say?
Oh, so I worked in trade publishing and marketing. And after a number of years, going back to, my dad being a professor, I'd always also really been interested in teaching. So I ended up getting a teaching degree, and I went into teaching for a number of years.
Elementary school or?
Yeah, so I was actually teaching elementary school. I did a couple of different grades, but, really young children. And I was then, teaching reading and writing.
Sure.
So it's kind of a different side of, seeing what books kids liked and helping them with reading skills and writing skills.
Right. Well, but it's important.
Yeah, so it was really interesting, and it complemented kind of what I've been doing at the publishing company. But what I always kind of came back to as I was teaching was I really missed, I loved teaching, but I really missed actually working on the books.
Right.
So after a number of years, I decided that I wanted to go back into publishing, but I decided I wanted to go off on my own. And that's how I ended up, doing freelance writing, proofreading, and book marketing, because I had all these skills.
Right. So you left teaching completely.
Yes, I left teaching completely and went back to publishing, but on my own, and using all these skills that I had from working in publishing. And I actually have found that my teaching degree and experience has really helped me because I'm able to really effectively coach authors. Um, there's a lot of people who've worked in publishing or have, really great writing or proofreading skills, but not a lot of people have actually taught.
Right.
I think I bring, that uniqueness to whenever I'm working with a client.
Okay. So, and you working on a lot of books for children, or, trade publications in the educational space, or?
So I work on primary, anything that comes my way. So I'll work on any type of book. I do get a lot of self-published authors coming to me, especially with, self-published authors being on their own. They really need some guidance, especially when it comes to things like book marketing.
Sure.
But I've worked with authors who are doing children's books. I've worked on, educational content for like, test programs. Um,
Got it.
Nonfiction, novels, biographies, really a wide range of things. And I think that's one of the exciting parts of being freelance is you get, to work on a bunch of different things. You learn a lot of new things. You meet a lot of new people.
Right. So do you work with a fair amount of small business owners, helping them with content and on the marketing side?
Yes, so that's the other part of my business, which is also really important. And I think there's a really big need for, writing and proofreading services, especially if you don't have somebody on staff to help you with copywriting
Right.
or with proofreading, or maybe, you're not happy with your own, skills, but you have a lot of expertise that you want to share with others.
Right. Well, most business owners, certainly don't have a copywriter on staff.
Yeah, and even just the time to, it takes a lot of time to write content. So I do help small business owners as well.
Yeah.
And especially if, a lot of people have ideas of, okay, I would like to write an article about, these top 5, points about my business.
Yeah.
I can kind of mold it and get it ready for them, and then they could add some of their own touches to it to make it sound like it's in their voice.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's a big key to being a good copywriter, is to be able to write kind of in the style that the person, so it reflects on them. You're not trying to reflect on you. So, and I think it's hard when you're a business owner. Like you get an article done or whatever, but to do it on a regular basis is difficult when you're not a writer, when you're not an English person. You know what I mean? I mean, we're all English people. That sounds funny, but you know what I mean? Like, so where you're not used to doing that. I mean, I like doing the podcast. You come on and we're doing an interview. We're having a good time. We're talking and everything. It's great. I don't need to prepare anything. I want to admit that on the mic, but you gave me your bio. I know your background. We're having a conversation, but I'm writing a book right now, for example, with a friend of mine who is he's a PR guy. So he's writing these series of books. So it's like, 10 ways to do whatever. So maybe it's 10 ways to groom your cat. So he's working with a person who has cats, and 10 ways to cook a hot dog is work. I'm making that up. I don't know what his books are about, but this is one about being a lawyer, 10 ways to get sued. I forget what we're working on. And it's like pulling teeth from me. It's like pulling my teeth. I can't, I write stuff. I'm like, I write a paragraph. Oh, that's good. He's like, a paragraph? We need pages.
Yeah.
So then, add this in. Think of an example here. You know what I mean? Do you find that you have to like kind of pull it out of your client, pull it out of them?
Yeah, no, I think that's there's a couple of things that you said that really, speak to me. And, the first is just, finding the time and the focus to get the work done. Like it takes so much time to do, especially if you are writing a book. It takes a lot of time and focus and energy, and, it's very easy to get distracted and,
like maybe you could sit down and write a 20-page article. I have to like block out time on my calendar. I lose my mind.
Yeah. And then even just,
I don't know.
And there's also a lot of, people who, have kind of, want to share expertise, maybe like, let's say like a professional organizer, maybe they want to like share like, your top tips for, organizing your closet, but they don't really like writing, or they don't have the time to.
Yeah, they can't organize it. Like in their head, it's fine. They could talk about it. But if you take what I'm saying and you put it on paper, it might make no sense.
Yeah, exactly. And even just like, kind of wanting to leverage their, their expertise and their business, but not being able to kind of execute it. So I could definitely help with those things as well.
Communication, right, is the biggest key.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
So did you always find like this came naturally to you when you were younger? Like you were always a good writer and things like that? Like one of my daughters is a big creative writer, and the other two, my son and my other daughter, they don't really want to do so much but she writes these stories that sound like, I should show you some of them. She submitted the story a couple of years ago on her own to some international creative writing story contest. And out of 1,500 kids, she doesn't know exactly where she finished, but she certainly finished in the top 15 because she
Oh,
got
wow.
asked back. And it's
That's
like a page and
amazing.
a half or whatever. Just this, I don't know what goes through her head. She just sits down and she writes these creative stories. But I don't know, people like have a knack. Like you've always had a knack for that kind of writing, right?
Yeah, that's really nice to hear about your children.
I'll send it to you after the podcast. I'll
Yeah, that
forward it
sounds
to you.
great. So yeah, no, I've just always had like natural writing and proofreading skills. I definitely, as far as my writing goes, I'd say I'm more of like a nonfiction person.
Well,
Just
that helps because of the field you're working in. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that's where I think, that's where I do the best work. But I've just always found those skills really natural. And then I've always just really been drawn to things like that. Like when I was a little girl, I used to also make little books and stuff on my
There you go.
computer.
Right.
And, I had like a few series, like I read like almost every Nancy Drew book and like the Boxcar
Yeah.
Children.
All this. Yeah. The boxcar. I used to read the books to them. That's a good series.
Yeah, and what's so great too is having, been in teaching, like a lot of these books are still read in the schools. Like
Yeah.
the school library has all these books that, I was reading as a little girl. It's really neat that they're still, they're just classics.
Yeah. Plus the cost of movie making changed everything. So all these books become movies. So the kids see the movies and they read the books, and it kind of carries over. But I think it's funny because I don't know if I told you the story, but so my daughter wanted uh, a typewriter, right? So she wanted to type her own things. She didn't want to do it on the computer. She wanted that experience of like pushing the keys, the whole thing. So she does all of her research and she finds this like, it wasn't an old typewriter. It was like a retro version of a typewriter. It was the color of my shirt. So the typewriter had this plastic cover on it and it had the keys, like if you type too fast, they get stuck
Uh-huh.
on the thing and you had to like white it out, right? So I said to her, "That's great. I'm surprised you don't want to get like electric typewriter." Like she spent all this research, she spent her Hanukkah money on it. She was so mad at me that I didn't tell her that electric typewriters existed. Like how she didn't come across this in her research, I don't know. She was so mad. She goes, because the keys were getting stuck all the time, and she goes, "They make electric typewriters?" I'm like, "Yeah, we have plumbing in the house too." So it was funny that she had like looked for this thing and she thought that was going to be the retro thing and she could have gotten an electric typewriter. It would have been a lot easier typing along and everything like that. But
Yeah, no, it's funny too. Sometimes I think about like writing a book many years ago before computers, like and just like how
like
long
by
it
hand,
would
right?
take you to actually get any, written work. And if you mess up and you have to change
What'd
something,
you have
like
to
now it's
do?
so
Yeah.
easy.
White out, right? So I don't know. I remember I learned to type in 8th grade. We had those old black typewriters. Remember those things? You break your knuckles while you're typing and then you have to push like the thing over at the end to return. Yeah, it was like the real days of being like a reporter. Like, but they make keyboards now that are like mechanical keyboards. They like feel like a typewriter. My son said they're great. I have no idea why somebody would do that, but have you heard about those?
No, actually, I've never
They're like
used one of those.
mechanical keyboards. So that when you
Okay.
type, it feels like you're typing on a typewriter.
Oh, neat.
Like, I
Okay.
don't know there must be some psychological philosophy behind that.
Huh.
Because
Okay.
who
No, I
would
don't
spend
know
money?
about them.
Yeah, on an extra keyboard, you just spend money for no reason. So something to research after the podcast. But anyway, so so we were talking about writing books. So have you ever like written a book for somebody where you literally had to sit with them and they had to dictate the book? And because I know some people want to get books out, they can't even write. They just don't want to do it.
So I haven't actually worked on a book where I had to, do that much hand holding. But I have done articles for small business owners who, they would actually give me the information over the phone and I would type it and then write
Got
it
it.
for them. Um,
Topic in their business or something like that.
exactly. Like, okay, these are the 4 things I want to talk about. These are like the main points I want to discuss. But like I made it into more, writing form and into a blog post for them.
Right. Yeah, they don't know what to do with the content. So, and then you deal with all the posting and everything too, or no?
No. So usually, if it's a small boat business owner, they either have their own blog that they're posting it on,
Got it.
or they have like some type of a guest blog arrangement with the blog that they're submitting to.
So you send the information to them and they submit it wherever they're submitting it.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. What do you remember some of the topics you've written on off the top
Yeah.
of your
So
head?
as far as, blogging, I've done some children's meditation. I've done wedding content, um, some divorce.
Like in a wedding, like a magazine or like about someone else's wedding?
Like wedding planning.
Oh, okay. It
That
makes
was
sense.
really fun. And some of them, some of the topics are fun because, like, for example, the wedding planning, like I brought my own experience from when I planned my wedding to it.
Right. Exactly.
I do try to stay away from anything that's too technical or that I need like the background
Yeah.
knowledge.
Like you had to do tons of research to learn, and then you're not still
Yeah,
not sure if you're doing it right. Right.
yeah. Like I don't think I'd be a great fit for writing articles about some type of a computer tech topic that I'm just not. I don't have the background knowledge.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
But there's a lot of things like parenting or lifestyle things. That I can use my own background knowledge with mixed with the person's web content and doing research online that I can kind of put something together.
Anything that was like so boring that I shouldn't ask you that because you'll say it and then the people will be like, oh, my article was boring. You know.
No, I really never worked on anything boring. Everything I've worked on has been really interesting, and as I mentioned, I think part of what I really like about what I do is that I am working on so many different things. And for example, I worked on a sports biography,
Oh,
and that was I'm not really a huge sports person, but I
right.
found that really interesting because I was learning about somebody's life that I didn't know about. Um, and so things like that too, that I find things that I never would have thought that I would be interested in, and just learn new information about it, which is
So
great.
that one, but sports biography, you got to sit down and take notes and learn about his life or her life, right?
So that one I was actually doing more editorial work. So the
Got it.
writing was done, but he just
So this
needs.
person would write whatever they're writing, stream of consciousness, then you would clean it up and
Exactly. Yeah, I would do some more like proofreading and make sure there's no grammatical errors or proofreading, typos or anything. But I thought that was really interesting, and so I always, I'm really open to new topics and whatever comes my way. And um, I also, since I have the education background, I do find things that are educational really interesting. Um, so I worked on some like science content for an elementary school.
for like textbook stuff or
Yeah, so I do like some stuff like that. I do some proofreading in that area.
right.
I'm definitely, really interested in my business growing that area of more educational materials too.
Sure. Was it hard to walk away from I mean, how long did you teach? How many years?
I was only teaching a couple of years.
Oh, okay. So it wasn't like you were
Yeah,
teaching 17 years and then you're walking away from, yeah.
no, I mean, I definitely, there's a lot of things I really miss about it. But I really, I felt like my calling was going back to books. And, I think I take my teaching with me now by trying to do presentations about publishing topics. Recently I did a small business owners presentation where I was teaching business owners about, using writing in their business plan.
Right. Yeah.
I'm finding I still do a lot of teaching and coaching in what I'm doing, which is really
But
exciting.
not to kids.
Exactly, yeah, to adults who are writing.
Yeah. Well, when you were teaching, you taught elementary school?
Yeah, I taught elementary
Yeah.
school.
So you have to teach everything in elementary school. You're a generalist teacher. You can't like teach English. You're not the English teacher. You're the everything teacher for the most part.
Yeah, no, exactly. When I was teaching elementary school, I was teaching math, science, writing, reading, uh,
Right.
really
Yeah.
everything. So,
Yes.
but it was really a really great experience, and but I think that I found through that I really am drawn to reading and writing, which is
Yeah.
kind of how I got back to what I'm doing.
Yeah. Because you kept finding yourself back there. I've always been a decent reader, but I don't really read too much anymore. Now I like listen to audible books all the time. Like because I'm always reading contracts. Like I can draft a contract. I'm good at that. But in terms of like, writing, it's terrible, I think. And then I listen to books because I mean I could read books. I'm not saying I can't read, but I just find it more productive to listen to the books in the car and stuff. So if you have a book and it's not an audible, I might have trouble following it. Like even on Kindle is basically the same as reading. So that's why I'm a podcast person because it's audible and I can listen to it.
Yeah, I mean, it is hard to find the time to read, and so I think that's why a lot of people do love, podcasts and audiobooks. To your point, it's something that they can do while they're, traveling or in the car or doing other things, and they can just put it on in the background, but they're still, hearing it. But that's what's so great that there's so many more forms of books now.
Now, you consider yourself a fast reader, though? I mean, like, I know people that they're reading 5, 10 books a week. I'm like, I can't read 5, 10 books in a year. Maybe not a year, but you know what I mean? I could read a book a week would be a lot.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I don't do a lot of reading on my own for pleasure, and it's because I have to read for what I'm doing.
Yeah, like me too, right? It's like, who wants to read outside of work when you're reading inside of work, right?
So yeah, but I do think I do read fast just because I'm constantly reading things and proofreading things and rewriting things. So I just it's just since it's like my day to day,
Right.
I have developed the ability to do that quickly. But unfortunately, I don't have a lot of time to read independent of my work.
Yeah, because you're busy, right? It fills your head. You can't fill your head with too much stuff. Like if I'm reading a lot of stuff, then I don't remember the contracts that I'm writing for my clients, you know?
Yeah,
So,
and
yeah,
anytime I'm working on a book where uh, especially if I'm going to do some type of marketing, I try to read as much of it as possible. And even just doing that, that takes a lot of time, especially if you're working with a few people at once.
yeah, that's true. I didn't even think about that. So you're working with multiple things at different times. So you could be working on a book for a while, and then you got to switch gears and start working on an article for a whole different company or person or whatever, and then come back to it. That's
Exactly.
hard. That's hard. I think it's hard. Maybe it's me. Yeah. But I guess maybe you get used to it. Like, I mean, I guess I do that as a lawyer. I got to work on one client's thing, and then I got to do a will over here, and then I got to do agreement over here. So yeah, I guess it's the same thing. But it seems like if you're writing a book, you're like immersed in it, or an article. I guess I don't know. Do you have like a process that you use? You think when you write all the time, like it's a certain process, even if it's subconscious. I'm just saying, in terms of how you go through it.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So I do a lot of time blocking. So like I'll say like, okay, from these hours I'm going to work on work for this client. These hours and we work on a different client. I do a lot of time blocking and like organizing just my weeks, like
Right.
down to the hour, just to make sure that I
Just so
can.
you don't make yourself crazy. You don't know which direction to turn, right?
Yeah, and then I have like if I'm working with a client, like I have really uh, organized files on my computer and the hard copy, and I have everything in one place so that I can very easily go and grab somebody else's project. But it is true that like I'm working on a bunch of different things at once, and they're all different. They're not related necessarily, so it
Right.
does require a lot of planning and thinking and.
Yeah, but if you don't block it out, you're never going to give that project the time that it's due.
Yeah, exactly. And just the nature of what I'm doing, sometimes I'll need to make quicker turnarounds, whereas other times I'll be working with someone and there's no urgency. So
Right.
you have to do a lot of.
Could be a current blog post. They want to get it out, right?
Yeah, exactly. Or, it could be, maybe they have some type of a deadline with a self-publisher, or they, want to get a book out for this
Right.
date. So, I do a lot of things by deadline. So that kind of dictates my work schedule too.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you find that what was I just lost my train of thought. If Do you find that when you're working on something, if you don't um oh, I know what I was going to say. If I find that people, they would be better off if they manage their time like you were saying, in terms of blocking their time out. Like they don't, I mean, they'll have a list of stuff to do, but they don't schedule it. So you get to the office, or wherever our office is these days, and your day goes by and you look and you still have your list in front of you. You haven't done anything on your list because you're just dealing with the phones ringing, right? Everybody's calling you. Like when I'm working on something, I don't answer the phone. If I block that time out, I mean, if it's my wife, I'll answer the phone, the kids. But if it's a client, I mean, if it's that important, they'll send me an email, they'll text me, they'll keep calling me, and then I'll know that they're going crazy and I'll have to answer the phone. But for the most part, if I don't do that, yeah, I'm working on projects right now. I probably did 4 of them before you called. I'm like, I don't know which way to turn. Because it's just one of those days. But I think that that's good advice. I know it has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but it's good advice for people in terms of managing their time and getting things done, to block time out and say, okay, especially when it comes to writing, and creating content, because I think that, first of all, if you don't know them that well, you do want them to give you something, right? Because you can get a flavor for the kind of person they are and not change it too much. And they're like, oh, they didn't write this. You ever see something when you know the person, you're like, there's no way they wrote this.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what I was saying. Any blog content that I do, I think it's really great when the person who I'm writing for goes in after and kind of make some changes to make it more in their voice. But at least they have like the skeleton or of what they're going to be writing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely agree that also when I'm a lot of time, just kind of the nature of the kind of work I'm doing. Like if I'm blocking my time out to work on a project, I might not answer my phone, but it's because I have to, I need to focus on that client's work. And then,
Yeah,
I
you
have,
lose your train of thought, and then whatever's coming flowing out of your head, it stops. That's not good.
yeah, and exactly in this kind of work I'm doing, it takes me more time if I stop and then come back to it. Like if I'm in the middle of what I'm doing and I'm in the zone,
Right.
it's really helpful to kind of come back, especially if it's not urgent.
Do you ever suffer from total writer's block? Like you sit down for the day, you're like, oh my God, I can't think of anything to write. I
Um,
rarely have that happen.
yeah, I guess I don't really have that happen too
You're
much.
so used to writing, probably.
Yeah, no, I'm so
Right.
used to writing, and I'm kind of always thinking.
Yeah.
Uh, so I always have a lot of ideas and
I
energy.
definitely have that problem. Like I'll be working on a contract for somebody. I'll get to the office and be like, I cannot work on this today. I can't think of anything to say. I don't know what I want to do. And I got to give it another day and let my brain cook a little bit. Cause I just, it's just different for me. But what kind of projects are you working on now? Like in terms of industries or?
So I actually I'm starting to work on a an academic book, but I'm doing more marketing related to someone's business. But they have an academic title which is tied into their business, and I'm going to do some
Got
local
it.
reach for them. So I'm really excited about that. I'm also starting to work with another self-published author, kind of similar, has a business that's related to her book, um,
Right.
and is self-published, and needs help getting the word out about the book. There's a lot of self-published authors who need assistance because they're on their own and they don't really they need some guidance and even just helping hands to get
Right.
some good ideas. And I've done things in pre-COVID, a lot of like event setup, so if somebody wanted to do like library events or school visits, different things like that. I've done solicited book reviews for authors, uh, help them with their social media. So there's a lot of different ways I can work with authors. But I do find that self-published authors
Yeah.
really benefit from working with me because they have some expert knowledge and guidance and just even just the help to get
Right.
them.
Right. Well, if they're, I guess if you were the big publisher, they have copywriters and editors, right? And things like that.
Yeah, so it depends on the publishing company, but a lot of times they have, some type of marketing or publicity person that helps you. But the author does still do a lot of it on their own.
Yeah.
Um, but they do have somebody to, kind of hold their hand more and that does some implementing. But yeah, when you're self-published, you usually either have to hire someone or if you have a small business, you might have marketing staff that helps you kind of blend it into your business. And so it kind of depends case by case. But I do think there's with so many people self-publishing,
Yeah.
there's a lot of you know great things that I can help authors with.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. So um, when somebody wants to self-publish, like what constitutes self-publishing? Obviously, if you're with Simon and Schuster, you're not self-publishing. So they're a publishing house. But is it me creating an ebook and then I'm just sending it out to people? Am I getting it printed and bound somewhere? I mean, what's self-publishing involve and entail?
Great question. So I mean, self-publishing can be just an ebook. It could be a print and ebook, or it could be just a print book. There's a bunch of different self-publishing tools, like things like Amazon.
So you can self-publish a book to Amazon.
Exactly. Yeah, you can
Okay.
self-publish to Amazon. You could self-publish to. There's a bunch of different platforms, so that's not the only one.
So you submit it to them. They don't obviously put anything up, so they got to approve the book or whatever.
Yeah, so a lot of in those cases, and a lot of people are doing that now, using the self-published platforms. But the author, is in charge of getting everything, proofread, and if
Right.
you illustrations, the author works on that, or hires an illustrator. But they, get the files kind of ready with the self-publisher, and then the self-publisher, would take care of the actual, printing or the distribution of the ebook or whatever, package they have with them.
So you are going to a publisher, but they're like a self-publishing house. And is it print on demand? Like, I mean, am I ordering 1,000 books and then I got to ship them out when somebody buys them on Amazon, or is it all behind the scenes taken care of as the orders are placed?
So it depends on the self-publisher. There
Okay.
are some that do the print on demand, and I think a lot of people do that just for the the cost.
Yeah, because a lot of books are really content marketing. You're not going to become like an acclaimed author or you be on the New York Times bestseller list.
Yeah, there's a
right?
lot of, yeah, and there's a lot of people that are looking to leverage their expertise, like, through a business or something where maybe they want to give out a book to a client or kind
Yeah.
of what you're saying, just
Makes
have
them look like an expert, right?
yeah, and it gives them like, something that they can hand out to a client, or maybe like if they do like a lot of talks um,
Right.
on like, presentations, they can sell them there, or they can include it in part of the admission price. So, there's a lot of people doing those kinds of things, but, all the self-publishers have different options. So it kind of depends on what you're looking for, but some are print on demand, others, you'll have, 1,000 copies or however
Like a
many.
minimum, right? So it depends on
Exactly.
the package that you're like buying into, so to speak.
Exactly. Yep. And then, some of them will store them for you. Others, I know authors who've had them, in their living room.
Yeah, like boxes and boxes of books, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't want that. Like, what if my wife would be like, "What the hell are we doing this?" Ah, I wrote a book. Great, get them out of my house.
So yeah,
Plus, then you
kind of.
got to ship them yourself, right? So you don't want to do that.
Yeah, and that's exactly like some self-publishing, platforms will mail it for you. Others, you'll exactly like you have to take care of the shipping. So it really just depends. But those are some of the things that somebody who's thinking about self-publishing has to do that research and learn about all those different things and
Right.
figure out like what works for them. Because somebody might have no problem mailing their book. Another person might be like exactly to your point, like I don't want to
Be involved at all. Yeah.
exactly like I don't have time and that's just
Right.
not appealing to me. So it
So they
really
can go on the web and do a search for self-publishers and look at different ones. And I'm sure Amazon
exactly.
has a whole fulfillment process, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Amazon's really popular. There's other ones like there's one called Book Baby, Ingram Spark.
Okay.
So there's a bunch, but there's even like smaller, more like mom and pop, self-publishing houses that do, more hands-on work that's not like a big company.
Right. Then you're a
Um,
smaller author and you get a little bit more attention than Amazon.
exactly.
They don't really care too much about you.
But the thing is that like more people are doing that because it's easier than jumping through the hoops of trying to find a publisher that wants to
Right.
publish.
Amazon probably does turnkey, right? If they accept your book, you pay them a fee, or I don't know how it works. And plus, a lot more people are searching on Amazon. So if they're looking for your book, probably the first place they go is to Amazon.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it is really important to be on Amazon. But yeah, to your point, like, it just takes away like the time that it would take to try to find a publisher to publish it.
Right.
And even it is difficult to get published. So, not everyone who, works on a book manuscript for a publishing house, can find someone to publish it, or it takes years. So a lot of people are turning to self-publishing.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think it's not like people like think they're going to write a book. They're going to go to some publishing house. They're going to give $1 million advance, and then they'll publish their book and they'll be famous like James Patterson. And it's not going to happen.
Yeah, no, unfortunately, I think there's like some myths around the actual realities of publishing. It does, some books take off for just, you just never know what will take
Right.
off.
It's like business too. It's probably a level of percentage of success, right? It's probably very small relative to the number, especially nowadays. There's even more books that are published because it's easier to publish books.
Yeah, and I definitely think that, publishing a book for your business is a good idea because you already have, some built-in buyers, through your clients and
Right. Well, that's the thing. It's content marketing. I think if people think about what you do, copywriting, writing a book, writing an article, it's all content marketing. It's to drive people to their websites and to see you as not, I won't call it an expert, a knowledgeable person in your field, whether it's business law. I mean, I guess do you write for yourself? Do you write about what you do and use it as content to
yeah,
promote your services?
it's funny. It's kind of like what you were saying, what I was saying about reading. Like, I feel like I find that I spend so much time working on other people's content that I don't spend a lot of time working on my own.
Right.
So I actually don't. But one of the things I've been working on, in the quarantine and like just like having more time now, I am working on more content marketing for myself. So I'm planning to starting in September. I'm going to be launching some new things and working on some new
Yeah, we
projects.
want to teach people how to start to create content for themselves. Then they can come to you for the editing and the tips, and maybe you could do an online course or videos. It doesn't have to be live, where
Yeah,
you can teach people how to be better writers. You know what I mean? Because it's definitely a learned skill. I mean, I'm not saying that there is a certain extent to having a knack for it, right? but some of it can be taught. I mean, to the point where you get good enough that they can produce something that you can work with, and I think there's that opportunity out there to be maybe you could write a book on how to write a book. I don't know. I'm
Yeah,
sure
no,
there's books like that, right? How to
yeah,
write a
no.
book.
A big thing right now is like book coaching. So it's, similar. It's like,
I've been getting some emails about that lately. You want to get published? Attend
yeah,
our live seminar. I'm like,
yeah,
okay, no, thanks.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, book coaching is becoming a really popular thing because there's a lot of authors, kind of what you were saying about how, just finding the time and, the structure of,
Right. So they're 90-day challenge. They want to come to do our course and you'll have a book in 90 days.
Yeah.
You'll lose your job and your wife won't talk to you anymore, but you'll have a book.
Hopefully that doesn't happen.
Yeah, exactly. You get a little immersed in what you're doing. But you're right. That's the problem is that we have limited. I just was wondering if you are also doing your own marketing for the stuff. But it's like, this is right. You walk around, you get a hole in your shoe and you're a shoemaker. You're like, I'll worry about my shoes later. I got to do my client's shoes because they pay me to do that. I'll walk around with a hole in my shoe. It's okay.
I do spend, I try to give my clients, everybody I'm working with, like above and beyond my attention and just my focus. And I spend a lot of time working with them that I do sometimes, I do feel like I don't work on my business a lot.
Right.
But I do, some things I have done that, kind of align with what you were saying. I taught some workshops last fall in person. One was like a book publishing overview. So I went into like self-publishing and then the actual like, traditional publishing route.
Right. The people that don't understand a lot of that stuff.
Yeah. And I got a really, really great feedback from it. I actually just heard from someone recently who took the workshop and she's was working on a children's book and she didn't really know where to start. And she was like, oh, like, the class is so helpful. And she's now working on her illustrations and she's picking out her self-publisher.
Oh, wow.
So it was really exciting to hear from her recently and, that she's, almost done, and I can't wait to see her book come out.
Yeah.
But I've also recently been getting interest from libraries for that idea of kind of like an overview of self-publishing and publishing, and then like writer's tips and like tips for, kind of, how to actually make the book and like how to be a writer exactly, like, how to set the schedule and how to
right.
Edit your own work. And so I'm doing a library talk in August on that, and I actually just got interested in doing another one in the fall. So I think that's something I'm going to be doing more of.
Definitely. Well, you always hear I do this all the time in the podcast. I hear a story, I'm like, it's definitely a book in there, but they don't know like how to get started or what to do or how to approach it or from an organized, without being all over the place.
Yeah, and I think it's sometimes just so overwhelming to people. They have like all these great ideas, but it's like it's almost easier not to work on it.
Yeah, it's too overwhelming. How do you organize it? Where do you start? How do you build it? That type of stuff.
Yeah, I definitely recommend, I always recommend to authors I'm talking to, or, anyone who says that they're, they have an idea and they always wanted to work on it, but they never get the time, making some type of like a writing schedule. Because even if you just take like a half hour a day or, an hour.
You'd be surprised how far you get,
Yeah. And like, if you add that up by a couple months, you could have your book ready. And then even just like, I think sometimes we think of like the big picture of like the whole book and that's overwhelming. Right. But if you take like, okay, today I'm just going to work on the outline, or I'm going to work on research, or, one chapter, break it down into like small manageable pieces. It's like less overwhelming.
Yeah.
You get like better results and you have more fun with it.
All right. What else I was going to tell you? Oh, I want to mention this because this will be out in the fall anyway. So there's a new, hopefully they're still my sponsors. I have a new sponsor. It's called Royalty.
Okay.
So what it is it's a platform basically for posting. It's like a CRM, right? So you have these client management systems and then you send out email campaigns, whatever. But I think what's interesting in terms of you is that it allows people to post things on a regular basis, but they don't make the content. Okay. You could get it from the company. I mean, they'll tell you things like sometimes not related, but it's law, but it's not related to what I do. I might post it. But what I'm saying is that it might be things that people can use. Like you can make the content and then they click a button and it goes on all their websites and whatever, and their social media posting. That's always the biggest problem is getting the posts up.
Yeah. Okay. That's great to know.
Because you don't do that for them.
Yeah, no, I don't do that. I'll definitely have to check that out. It's interesting that they're one of your.
And I think they even have an agency version where you can have clients and you could say, listen, I'll do the blogs and I'll do the writing and the posts. And then when you see them, you just got to click on them and go to wherever they're going. You choose LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that like a lot of people want to use content, whether it's like blog posts or social media, and
Right.
to your point, it's like it takes a lot of time just to even get that posted, and
Yeah, this automates the process. I'm sure there's other companies out there that do it. I just happen to support the
yeah,
podcast, and I use them
great.
for all of my stuff. But I post stuff all the time. I get people to subscribe to my list. I don't know who they are. I don't know where they are. They just want to follow the law firm. They want to follow the podcast, whatever happens to be. But I don't know, it's $80, $90 a month or something. But it's the kind of thing, like, you make the content, then you give it to them. You don't know what they do with it. You don't know if they repurpose it, if they post it again, if they just don't do that.
Okay.
So I think that's one of the challenges. And I think that a lot of people don't know what to do. Like, they could hire you to do the content, but then they don't know what to do after that. They have to have somebody help them post and whatever, which you don't want to do, obviously.
Yeah, I definitely don't get into actually like the physical, posting of content. But I do, coach authors, like, especially like if I've had authors come to me where, they wanted to pitch themselves as an author of articles online. So I did like more like coaching sessions around that. So we talked, like, I taught them basically how to do that on their own.
Kind of guide them through the process.
Exactly. Like, I helped them brainstorm some ideas and places to pitch.
Yeah.
And we came up with like a nice, a good pitch to send out. But then they were going to, work on that on their own.
Like a public relations campaign for the book.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's another, that's a really great thing that authors can do too, is, pitching, smaller articles or maybe like an excerpt from their book.
Right.
And try to get it placed on somebody's website.
Or speak on the topic they're writing about, that type of thing.
Exactly. Yep. And
yeah.
Just like, raises their platform as an author and gets people to learn their name, and
definitely
gets more people's eyes on the book.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think writing is a challenge for a lot of people, but they need the content. Like, if you want to be relevant in the world, somebody said to me earlier, we were on a call, a networking call, and they said, well, I asked somebody does all their posts on Facebook and everything, does it get them business? And they said, no, not really. She said, so I don't need to do that. I go, no, they're wrong. It does get them business. They just don't realize that gets them direct business. Like, somebody sees the post and shares it with somebody else, and then somebody mentions it to somebody else, and then somebody's having a conversation, says, a friend of mine just showed me, hey, Lindsey, what was that post you showed me? Oh, you pull it up, you show it to me, and then I say, you ought to call this guy. He does, whatever. That's how it happens. It doesn't happen where it's an ad on the highway and you pull over on the highway and you write down the guy's phone number and you call him right away. You might have to pass the billboard 6 times and then be home once and say, oh yeah, I got a speeding ticket. What was that guy's name on the billboard? So you do a search, attorney, speeding tickets, billboard, and he pops up probably.
Yeah, no, definitely. And a lot of that content, like, if you search for, if somebody's thinking, like, looking for like book editor, and they might find me and they might find an article I wrote, and then, that's how they're learning about like my expertise, and like, oh, she said all these great things in this article.
Right.
She was featured here. So it's kind of indirect what you were saying. It's not a direct sale, but it is, helping your business. And I think also too, in social media, I feel like so many times, we're looking for things that are not direct sale, like, oh, buy this product, or, here are our services. So it's nice to be able to share kind of valued content that shows off your expertise, but without being so sales oriented.
That's the thing. It's soft selling. You're educating people, right, on whatever the topic is, which is actually what you do, right? You just do it for different people. And when they feel educated, they feel more comfortable, and then they can make a better decision as to whether they use your service or use your product, or they remember things and they tell other people when those other people, because I think, like, if you reach people on a post, let's say, right, 99% of those people don't need your service or your product right at that moment. Some of them may never need it, but a lot of them don't need it right when you hit them. It just doesn't work that way. 1%, I read that somewhere, like 1% of the people you're going to hit need your product or service right then. But you want the other ones to remember what it is you do later on.
Mm-hmm.
That's the key. And I guess if you're a good content writer anyway, it's good copy, compelling, memorable, funny, whatever, then that's advantageous. If you write, like, I hate to say it, but if you write crap, they're going to remember you for the guy who wrote the crappy article. You don't want them to remember that either.
Well, I think too, like I did a presentation recently, and one of my tips, to the audience was, just making sure to like proofread your work. If you spend all this time, writing an article, or, proofread it, or, have
Right.
somebody on staff proofread it, or have a friend that's
Right. There's typos all the times and things. There's no way that this person proofread this
yeah, because
based on
you
the
spend all that
typo.
time to write the article, and you want to make sure it's like really presenting you in the best way possible.
It's very tempting though. You're finished, send, you don't
Yeah.
look at it. You're like, and I've done that in posts where I put in a comment or something. I'm like, oh my God, I spelled my own name wrong. You have to edit it, but those you can edit, but yeah, that's so true. People don't take the time to read over what they're putting out there. You got to be a little careful about it, but
Yeah, and I've had, small business owners, similar to the writing, send me blog post articles, and go, for proofread. That's one of the services I do, and that way because I think too, like, we always find a second set of eyes finds things that we don't
all
find.
the time. Oh my God, your
So,
mind, after you've read something and worked on it for a long time, it's already changed words in your mind.
exactly.
Like that sentence is wrong, but your brain fixed it. So you think it's correct on the page. And then 2 days later, you go back to it and you're like, I didn't write that. But you
Exactly.
did. That's because your mind doesn't work. A good advice to parents, and I do this too, and I'm not an English person like you are. Your children should never be submitting anything in writing to their teachers without you looking at it. Because I've read stuff, I'll be like, the tense is all wrong. Who's this word spelled wrong? You left out a T. It's not, it says he, it's supposed to be she, he, because they don't see it either. That's just the way your mind works.
Yeah, I always recommend too, I completely agree with what you just said. And I also always recommend, no matter what you're writing, like come back to it a few days later and you'll see it differently. And, you'll see what's great about it. And then you'll notice some things that you should change, and you just get better, especially if you have the time. Obviously, sometimes we're just trying to get something out because it's, needs to be out then.
Yeah. And I'll tell you something. That's what I hate when people call me and they say, Mitch, I need a contract. Can you get it to me tomorrow? I'm like, yeah, but it won't be good. They're like, what do you mean? There's a process to writing a contract. Like I'll write the contract and then I'll come back to it later on and reread it and say, no, I don't like that. I'll change language. And if you're in a dispute or there's something going on, language is very important. And it may not be the most important thing in a blog article. Like, look, you don't want there to be typos in anything that you write, but if they write it, it won't end their life. But if I screw something up in a contract, it could be serious. So I don't like writing under pressure. I want to go back to it 2 or 3 times just for what you said, because your mind like fixes things in front of you. And then later on, you look at it, you're like, how did I even write that?
Yeah. Like how did I not notice that?
Right. But it was there the whole time, but your mind changes things.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like your memory. It's the same thing. You ever swear to God that you were with somebody on some particular day and they're like, Lindsey, we did not go to coffee that day. That day we went for pizza. And you're like, are you sure? And you swear that that's the case. And then you realize it was coffee with someone else, because your mind has a way of like mushing things together. That's kind of how we work. But that's why they work with a professional like you, because you have the discipline. Let's call it a discipline, right? You have the discipline and the skills to do things, like you said, systematically, to make sure that you get a better result than the average person. That's what makes you a professional as a writer and as a copywriter. It's not like something like, I can do that. Sure, you can do it. You can also write your own contracts and do your own legal work. But generally, I hate to say it, but when you're in trouble, there's always a problem with the contract. Always a problem with the contract. And I'm sure 9 times out of 10, if you read something that people did, right, previously, you're going to find something wrong with it. Something you would have changed. Something would have sounded a little bit better. Something would have been a little bit more compelling. They should give you a try ahead of time, not after.
Yeah, no, I always, anytime somebody sends me something, I always find there's always something.
Always.
I always try to also offer like suggestions to make it more engaging, or, like, even if it's really great and it just needs some kind of grammatical error changing and different like typo changes and things like that. I can always give some ideas to make it even better too.
So how can people try you out or interact with you? How do they reach you? We'll put stuff in the show notes, but how can they find you?
Okay. So on Facebook, I have a Facebook page that I update regularly, and I share information about different things that I'm doing, like this podcast. and
Okay.
the different talks I'm doing and my services.
Okay.
So you just look at Lindsey Noelle Publishing Services on
Okay.
Facebook.
I guess Noelle's your middle name.
And yep,
Okay.
Noelle is my middle name.
Okay. That's better than Mac because you had told me, and I see it. It's Mac is Mach, not Mack, but it's pronounced Mac. So they probably wouldn't find you with Mac.
Yeah, and I get all the time. Everybody thinks it's Mach, so
Mach.
it's
Yeah.
very
Okay. Well, if they
common.
spell it that way, they'll find you then. Yeah.
So yeah, and then also, I would love to answer questions for anyone. My email address is Lindsey with an E-Y
Okay.
at lnpublishingservices.com.
Okay. And we'll put a link to that in the show notes too.
Okay, great. And then,
Okay.
yeah, anyone that has interest in working with me or just wants more information, I do a free, 30-minute conference call where we go over kind of the project, what you're looking for, and
Oh,
we
good.
meet each other.
Okay.
I love working with authors of all different types of material and, small business owners. Um,
Do
and
you
then
work with people if they're just starting out, like they want to write a book and they don't even know how to get started? You'll do a free consult with them and talk to them about ideas and see if they want to move forward?
exactly, yep, definitely,
Perfect.
first-time authors, self-published authors. I also work with, traditionally published authors who just need, extra help, especially in things like book marketing. Maybe, they have somebody at the publishing company they're working with, but need some help kind of implementing some of the things on their end. So I'm available for things like that too.
Okay, great. The lights just flickered in my room. Okay. So I appreciate coming on. We've spent almost an hour together. It goes fast. And we'll get this out soon. But in the meantime, what I will do is, hold on.